all to activate.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Tonight, we're talking about camping for newbies, and this is a big topic. I myself have not done a lot of camping. It's been a long time, but I've got two amazing people with me here tonight. So Cindy, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about maybe a memorable camping experience. What do you like best about camping?
All right. My name is Cindy Coan, and I have the Travel Ninja, which is where people mostly know me from. And God, I can't even tell you my most memorable experience. I've had some interesting things, but I know I've been camping since I was a kid. My dad and my mom would take us not just camping, but I think I've mentioned this to you before, April. We spent a lot of time along the river, along the lake fishing. So sometimes that was in a tent, sometimes that was out of the car, sometimes that was for the afternoon, and sometimes that was for the week. So when I was younger, I hated it. So it was so much work, right? And my kids, they say the same thing, because when my kids were young, I would drag them off to go camping as well. Because, there's all the setup of the camp gear and whatever. So it was always a challenge, like, oh, it's going to be so much work. But now I love the challenge. I actually really enjoy the challenge of camping. I like sleeping outside. I like cooking outside. Food tastes better outside. And I also like the freedom of camping, where you don't have to really answer to anybody. You get a little campsite and nobody talks to you if you don't want to, or you can go chit chat, but you have that kind of private, personal thing. So that's it.
No, that's great. And yeah. Joe, welcome, Joe. Can you hear me, Joe?
Hi.
Hey, so tell everyone about your experience, because you've got a book and everything, so you've got some skills to share.
I got all kinds of things going on. So we did camping in tents 30 some years ago. And in 2007, we got a line on an RV. And so it was a 1987 Mallard. We said, let's try getting off the ground and sleeping on the ground, and let's try the RV thing. Well, being new to the RV perspective, I had no idea what I was doing, and I completely ruined the RV. It got water damage and all kinds of craziness. So it was my learning experience. We've since upgraded to a Class C, and now I'm a lot smarter 15 years later. And as you mentioned, I have a book. So I love talking to people that are new to RVing. So this is my book, RVing for Newbies, the manual. We'll talk about, by the time we're done tonight, I'll talk about where you can find it at. But it covers a lot of the 101 stuff when somebody goes out and buys an RV and they go, I don't know what to do next. Well, and that will cover a lot of that stuff.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Now we love camping. We have this running joke when my wife is driving and says, get in the back and make me a sandwich.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. We've heard some stories about that. So I'm going to start. I've got some questions. I know I see some people popping into chat, which is super exciting. So I'll try to look at those questions in a little bit. But there's a lot that goes into planning a camping experience. So Cindy, I'll start with you. How do you start planning a camping experience?
Well, I think that, the first thing you want to know is, what kind of camping experience you're trying to have. So you may have a specific destination in mind, but just like when you're planning any other trip, you want to start with, when and where. That's what you're looking at. Like when are you going to go and where are you going to go? Because that's going to dictate what you need. Right? Like what kind of gear do you need? What kind of tent do you want? A lot of that stuff will matter about where you're going. And of course, when and what time of year it is. So I think you want to start with those two things. And then a lot of other things will fall into place. As I've mentioned before, when I've talked about camping sites, in the United States, you can only camp at, published places. There are other countries in the world where they have free camping. You can do a little bit of that here, but it's not something that is encouraged of just pulling over your car and free camping. But once you pick a campsite, then a lot of things will fall into place, right? Where are you going to be able to drive in? Are you going to hike in? Like, what are you exactly going to do to camp? And then you can figure out from there and what you need to do. That's my first, I guess I'm going to start there. Just figure out where you want to go and when you want to go, and look into that space. And then we'll come back and we can talk about things like, there's a lot of other questions like, do I take a tent? Do I do whatever? But it's going to be the same for Joe, right? Because it's matter where you can hook up or not, right?
Is that where you would start, Joseph, thinking about where you want to go, what time of year? So for planning?
So some RVs, they can handle, some RVs can handle camping in the winter, other ones not so much. So, but so like my wife and I, we are working through the United States, and then I'm based out of Ohio, so we're working through all the counties in Ohio at the same time. A lot of times we're empty nesters now, so we skip a lot of the campgrounds that have a lot of things more catered towards kids and stuff. And so we tend to stay at mom and pop campgrounds, because we know COVID's been a tough thing for some of those people. And we figured, let's help support a mom and pop type business. So we end up staying in a lot of smaller type campgrounds. But it's the same thing. You have to decide in an RV, how much stuff are you going to take?
Right.
Yes.
Whether it's figuring out you have a refrigerator and a freezer, how much food do you want to take and things of that sort.
Yeah. And how close are you going to be, right? It's like once you know when and where, a lot of things can fall into place. Like, do you need to haul it all with you? Right. That's the first thing. So, picking that is first. Before you even think about gear or anything, you want to know where you're going to be. Then all of that, the decisions kind of make themselves.
Yeah, that sounds fair. Yeah, and I'm sure there's better places, like you just mentioned, Joe, if you're thinking if it's cold weather or if there's inclement weather. I know it's tornado season right now, so I think I'd want to be thinking like where I might need to be, how sturdy is my camper or my tent, and what's my backup plan. But Cindy, how do you pick where? I mean, there's so many amazing places.
There are, and there's lots of, Joe's talking about some places you can look for places, but you can look at all of the state, county, and national parks. They all have campsites. Now, those are going to vary drastically, right? So not all campsites are alike by any stretch of the imagination. Some are going to be very primitive, and they'll even use that word primitive in their hike in. Some are going to have, showers and a pool.
A pool. Oh my God.
Yeah, because a lot of those are catering to RVers, right? So there's like a tent section, and then there's an RV section, and then and it's a whole little community right there. So there's a great place for you to do that. And so you would maybe what they would call car camp. Would you drive up and park your car in a space and then pop your tent out right there in that little area, much like an RV does. And then there's other areas where you might park and then have to walk in a little distance to find the camp spot or hike in. But looking at all the parks, and then just investigate what it is. You can they have reviews like everything else. So you can see what's the best. And again, you want to think about how primitive you want to be, how limited you want to be to what you're doing. If there's not public restrooms, that might be something that would be of concern to you. Some won't have that. Again, all of those kinds of things to find. But I would start with the parks. There are some other places like Hip Camp, which is like an Airbnb site for campers. So people are allowing you to use their backyard or their space to camp. And I think they do the same thing with RVs. You can find those there. There's a couple of others. But for newbie campers, I would stick with a noted campsite where campers are. They'll have more resources for you, and you'll have a flat place to put your tent, most likely. All of those things will be better. So I would start with the campgrounds, even out of the country as well. They have like campgrounds that you could use as well for newbies.
Okay. And Joe, how do you pick where to camp? I imagine depending on how big my RV or how small it is, it may preclude where I'm going to stay, and maybe touch on these where I might find some of these mom and pop places. Those sound great.
Yeah, so, and you're right. So RVs run anywhere from the short ones that are like maybe 16 to 20 foot, all the way up to 40, 45 foot, huge motorhomes with marble countertops and the whole 9 yards, and they run into sometimes the millions of dollars. So yeah, a lot of that depends on how big your RV is, how many slides it has. So it'll depend on how wide it will be also, as to where you may be able to camp. It's very, very easy. What I do is I look for, like, if I'm on Facebook, I look for a Facebook group for like the state that I live in. And maybe there's a campground review for like Oregon or Ohio, whatever. And I watch that Facebook group to see various places. And a lot of times people will go, I stayed here and I loved it. And then I'll go and look it up and go, oh, look, it's owned by a family. It's a mom and pop type campground. They've only got, say 50 sites. It's not, 250 sites. And they may have a pool like Cindy was talking about. They also have hot tubs. It's crazy. But yeah, so that's how we do our search and looking where we want to stay.
That's a great idea. That sounds fabulous. I'm going to skip down a little bit to, and I'll start with you, Joe. What are some of the things I would want to learn or practice before going? I mean, I see these great sites like, I think it's iMova and some other ones where you can get an RV for like $1 a night. But if I've never used one, what are some things I should do before I just go show up and rent it?
So renting is a good idea. If you're looking to see, do I really want to buy an RV? Rent one first. Absolutely. Learn some of the things that go along with it. When you go to rent it from the company, they'll talk a little bit about all of the pieces, parts. They won't give you a full 101 in it, but they'll at least explain to you how you have to go through and you have to dump the black tank and the gray tank and how to hook up water, how to hook up electricity. Those things are probably the most important. What I always tell people is if you're going to rent one or you're going to go and buy one and you don't understand all the pieces, parts, you will get a walkthrough at the dealership if you buy one. It won't be enough, so make sure you videotape it. But then camp in your driveway. Literally, if you are not like in a homeowners association where you can park your RV in your driveway, do your first camping in your driveway. Don't go back in the house unless you realize, look, I don't have a spoon. I can't stir the macaroni and cheese on the stove. Things of that sort. So okay, I'm building my list of things I need to have in the RV. And if you don't have it, you go, okay, go in the house, get this, add this to the list to make sure we bring it back out, when we get ready to go do real camping. That's probably one of the best recommendations I have.
Wow. That's a great recommendation. I wouldn't have even thought of that, but it's so true. So Cindy, what are some things you would want to learn or what I should learn or practice before I go camping?
Well, we would just talk to Cassie last night. Definitely put up your tent. If I don't care if you don't have a yard, put it up in your driveway, find a space, make sure that you know how that thing goes together and that you have all the pieces. Even though you may have just purchased it, they can be complicated or super simple. And I think sometimes the simpler ones are complicated. So definitely try to just put it up and then fold it back up. That's the hardest part. And the same thing with any other piece of equipment that you bring along. I've seen lots of people bring camping stoves for the first time and have no idea how to light it. And then they don't have food because they have no way to cook their food. Or they bring, something to power their phone with and they don't know how it works. Just make sure you test drive everything at least one time. It's very helpful to make sure that you give it a once over. And I would do the same thing, Joe, you're talking about cooking. If you're going to cook over a fire, it's really not that much different to cook over a fire than it is at home. You might want to try some of these things, think through it a little bit. My advice for meals and those kinds of things is to just sort of think through it in a timeline perspective, which is like, okay, I'm going to need, we're going to cook it. Do I have a pan? And do I have a spoon? And do I have all those things? And then when I get it done, I'm going to put it on a plate or a bowl. Where am I going to put it? And do I have such things? So just kind of walking yourself through those things, because if you don't pack it, you don't have it. And you don't need multiples of everything. You can reuse them. That kind of thing is helpful. But if you spend just a few minutes walking through your meals, so that's a very important part, walking through those to make sure you bring it. I have definitely been camping where you're eating cereal with a fork because you forgot your spoon or something as silly as that, which, you only make that mistake once. You remember those things, but it would help just to kind of think through what you're doing. And I do the same thing with toiletries and other things. Am I going to need a towel? Do I need shoes? Those kinds of things. Yeah, I kind of step myself through the day, if you will.
And being prepared, it just came to mind, like, are there certain times of the year where you can have an open fire, or do most of these camping sites have something to, as far as, you want to have the s'mores, are you gonna do it in a grill, or do you need to bring your own firewood, or is that provided?
Always have to bring your own firewood. I don't know any place that does that. And they all have different rules of fire. So we live in California, I do, and we have a lot of fire rules here around California fires. So some sites won't allow you to have fire. I've been on camping sites where we're not allowed to have campfire, but usually it's in a designated fire pit. Almost always they have a specific place for it. I would tell you that if you're going to do a fire, get your firewood away from the campground. They will often sell it there in a little camp store or right outside the campground, but it is at a premium. So buy your firewood at the grocery store at home, or wherever else you get your firewood, bring it from home. It's usually going to be about half the price. And bring more than you think you need, because you always need more than you think when it comes to firewood. And you can always leave it for the next camper. So it's not something you have to haul back. It's never wasted. Somebody else will enjoy it or take it over to your neighbor camper, whatever. But there's been lots of times we don't bring enough, and then you end up over at the camp store buying a little bit more to make it through the next day or whatever that is. So yeah.
Those are all great tips, you guys. Those are great. Do you have a favorite place you like to camp, Joseph?
Yeah, so we have a place down in Southern Ohio called Sandy Springs Campground. Evidently, as I spoke, it's a mom and pop campground. There's only about 40 or 45 sites there, and it's right on the Ohio River in the southern part of the state. And they have a boat ramp, and I can just walk from my campsite down to the river and I can fish. So that tends to be where we go quite often.
That sounds lovely. That sounds really beautiful. Cindy, do you have a favorite place you like to camp?
Oh, there's so many. The most beautiful place to camp is in Zion National Park. And I've been there several times. Breathtaking views. There's lots of different campgrounds in that park. And I wouldn't say that I could recommend any one of them over the other, because they're all really great. And that campground and that park, one of the beautiful things about it is huge national park, but they have a shuttle system. So it's wonderful. You park your car, you set up your tent, you get yourself settled, and then you can walk a little distance and then, hop on a tram and then, go quite a ways and go on a hike or see a waterfall. And then you don't have to hike all the way back to your campground. It does a little loop in the park, and a lot of the parks do that kind of thing. But Zion by far has the most beautiful views. Just amazing to open that tent and look outside and see that at Zion. Love it.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. Specialty items you might recommend, Joe.
Okay, so when you're talking about an RV, there's two things that are really important you need to protect. Number one, it's your electrical system. So wherever you go to plug into a pedestal at a campground, you have no idea what the electricity is going to be like there. So I always recommend to everybody I talk to is get yourself an electrical management system, and that plugs into the receptacle, and then your RV plugs into that. And what that does is protects you from surges, electrical surges of excessive voltage, but it also protects you for your RV if the voltage goes too low. It will shut the electricity off going to your RV so you don't burn up things like your air conditioning units. So there's one, electrical, and the other one is water. When you hook your hose up to your RV, and you hook it up to the receptacle, the water spigot there, you have no idea what the water pressure is going to be. So I always recommend a water pressure regulator so that you don't blow out your water lines if there's 100 PSI coming through your hose from the spigot, because your RV is only made to handle about 45 to 55 PSI at most. So a water pressure regulator is probably the second most important thing on there.
Wow, those are two really great items that a lot of us probably, even if we were renting, may not have thought of. We just think, just pull up, plug it in. That could be a
Plug it
nightmare.
in, turn on the hose. Yep.
Cheer. Cindy, what are some specialty items you might recommend for camping?
Well, I know I mentioned it yesterday, and most people who are experienced campers know that you need a tarp or a ground cover that goes under your tent. I highly encourage you invest in something that's good there. I also have one that's insulated, and I use that when I camp places where it's a little colder, because as you know, the ground holds that frozen weather, and it can be very cold to sleep on cold ground. So if you have an insulated ground cover that goes between the ground and your tent, and any kind of tarp or ground covering will protect your tent from tearing when you're using it. Another thing that you need to invest in is a little tiny broom and dustpan, because you do not take your shoes in your tent. That's the first lesson you learn as a camper. You bring I always bring a little kind of like a throw rug. And I lay that throw rug out the front door of your camping door. And that's where your shoes go. You take your shoes off and you walk in and out. Otherwise, you're going to end up with all kinds of stuff. And you're sleeping on the ground, right? Remember, you're laying down in your sleeping bag. You don't want all that sand or dirt or whatever in there. So, but at the end of the day, there will be some things. It's going to come in on your clothes. It's going to come in on your socks. So before you pack up your tent, you will want to take your little dustpan and broom and sweep the inside of it out before you fold it up, so you don't carry that with you next time. So I always bring that. Another thing that I have that I love is I have a pocket stove. Now this is an investment for me. It was a little tiny thing. It folds up into, I should have brought it out. It folds up. It's probably no bigger than my fist. And it is gas fueled. I think it would cost me maybe $50 is what the pocket stove cost, but I make coffee on it, right? It cooks really fast. Now there are some instant coffee things that are very similar to my pocket stove, but it is basically the pocket stove inside like a French press, right? It's all in one piece.
Right.
The reason I prefer the pocket stove is that I can also make other things, right? So I can swap out the French press or the kettle for a pan to fry eggs or do whatever. So if something so for just myself, instead of bringing a big propane stove, I bring my little pocket stove. And usually if it's just a couple people, that works really well. You don't need a bunch of things. So, and it cooks really fast. I really like the pocket stove, and I need it because I need my coffee and I don't have to haul out the whole thing to make my coffee in the morning. And I did invest in a large thermal French press. So it's insulated. So that when I make the French press coffee at the campsite, then the coffee stays hot longer and we can all share it, which is usually what I do also. So those are I have a few others, but those are definitely my top go-tos is coffee and keep my tent clean.
Yeah, those sound great. Oh my gosh. Well, let's see. This is all amazing information, and I know there's so much more. Let me see if there's any questions really in the chat.
I've been watching it. Not really. There's a bunch of comments, but not anything. Yeah.
Looks like we got a bunch of people watching from all around the world, but not direct questions. So, Joseph, I know you've got this whole guide. Do you ever offer any classes in your area, that type of thing? So if someone that's new to, there's so much in considering whether you're going to buy just a small RV that hooks onto a pickup, or if you're buying a whole self-contained driving unit like a motorhome. So do you offer any local classes? Maybe speak to that a little.
So no classes per se, but my sister organization, RV Mentor, the website rvmentor.com. I do offer mentoring to people who say they've just bought an RV and they're like, I don't know what to do. So I have gone and visited people at a campsite right after they've bought it. And they go, can you come up and help us? Show us how to hook up the sewer line. Show us how we do the water stuff. How does the propane work? How does my furnace work? How do my air conditioners work? So I have visited people at websites And I also talk to them on the phone via Zoom calls like we are now, and walk them through various parts of their RV.
Nice.
That would be super helpful. That's really
Yeah.
nice because a lot of us, we can read a book, but then we go and look at our panel or whatever, and we're
What
like,
is this?
What's this? This wire is not the same as in the book." So the Zoom consultations, those are great. Yeah. And Cindy, I know you've
Yes.
got
And
Oh, go ahead.
people
I'm sorry.
don't all learn the same way.
No.
No.
I would say
Definitely.
that people don't all learn the same way. I mean, so some people like to read the book. Some people would rather, you visit them in person. Some people are fine with Zoom. Some people like videos. So
Right.
I have videos of things like how to check your propane system for leaks and things of that sort. So I do produce videos too, but not a class per se. I've toyed around with the idea. I just haven't done it yet.
Yeah. I think a class would be kind of hard because it is very specific to their RV, right? I mean, what you have in the book is giving them that, but I think that's the challenge, right?
Yeah, I think the coaching idea though is fabulous. Just the one-on-one, pay for some coaching time to walk me through my RV and show me, that's fabulous. That's amazing. I mean,
if you're going to spend that money on an RV, you want to know how to use it and you don't want to ruin it. I think that's the biggest fear
exactly.
that somebody goes and invests in that. And then I don't know what to
Been there,
do.
done that.
Right.
I don't want to screw it up. Yeah.
Well, even for a weekend, I mean, you see these ads like Cruise America. I see them cruising in California. It looks like such a great way to experience California or the Midwest. I mean, there's so many great places in the United States to do that. But it's like, I can imagine the rental guy doesn't care. He's like, "Here, go buy, get out of here." And now I'm stuck. So having you available.
Here's the key. Have a nice day.
Yeah, exactly. Cindy, do you have some like newbie camping trips, I think, coming up, or what do you got?
I do. I have a trip coming up at the end of the month, April 29th in California. We're going to Napa, California. And although that one isn't marketed per se as for newbies, I always take newbies. I love people who've not camped before because it's so much fun to share that with them. And I have plenty of gear myself. So if you need something or you don't have anything, let me know. We can often either borrow or switch things around. So that's always fun. And then I do that one is in Napa, but the beautiful thing about that one, I'll just give my little tip there, is that because it's in Napa Valley, the campground is across the street from 2 wineries. So we don't even have to get in the car. We can set up our tents and then walk across the street into the vines, into the fields, and right over and have a wine tasting and taste the wine and bring bottles back, which is what we did last time, and then sit at the campground and have our lovely meal over the campfire. And then we can get in the car the next day, which is what we do, and kind of drive around and see the valley and see some other places to go. And then in June, I think it's June 10th, we're going to go up to sort of Central California along the beach. We're going to do some beach camping. I am putting that one as camping for newbies. I specifically like to have just all newbies come to this one, so no one feels intimidated to ask questions, and everybody, it's, one of their very first few times to camp, so that we can kind of teach them. We go through it. I have them set up the tents together. They make the fire together. So instead of normally when we camp a larger group, it's sort of like you do that and this person will do this. We do it together, so everybody learns how to do it in that one. And we'll be driving distance from Solvang, so we'll probably pop over there, which there's wine there too. So camping and wine, we do a lot of that in California.
Yeah. Wow, that sounds fabulous. I have one last question for both of you. I know it's summertime's coming up, and it's a popular time for families to get out. How far in advance should people be looking to reserve places? Are there tips if if the national park is all booked up? Are there some other suggestions that they may not have thought of? Or how far in advance in general do you need to plan grabbing a spot? Joe, got any tips?
Wow. So that's a tough one. It has been absolutely nuts with RV sales in the last 2 years. And people were making reservations. So let's take like in Ohio, you have 6 months. The window opens 6 months before you'd want to reserve. So you needed to reserve Memorial Day weekend, December of last year.
Oh, okay.
Because it's all booked up. The state parks are booked solid. A lot of the private campgrounds are booked solid. And if you don't get in on the when the window opens, you're probably not going to find it. Now, there's always cancellations.
Yep.
If you watch the website close enough, you can usually find a cancellation, and it might not be the spot you want on the river or whatever. But yeah, it's been crazy the last year and a half or so.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's the same for
Are you
tent
seeing
camping.
the same thing, Cindy?
Yeah, well, they actually here in California, it's not even, the last couple of years. It's been, I mean, when my son was in Boy Scouts, so when he was, this is like 15 years ago, we still had to book 6 months in advance for campgrounds, typically, especially popular campgrounds. So you need to, I think they open it up. So whatever the opening up is, right? If it opens up 6 months in advance, you need to get out there, especially if you're looking for a weekend campground. And like you said, Joe, if you have a specific space or area that you want to camp, those premium spots, they go fast. And usually, again, just like with RVs, you can look at the map of the campsite and you can see how close your site is to the restroom, to the beach, to the road, to whatever. And, we all have our preference of where we want to be closer to. And so if you want to get your pick of the litter, if you will, you need to be out there about 6 months or more in advance. But there are spots that open up. And you also can sometimes get middle of the week. So if you're not limited to weekends, you'll find a lot more spaces like Monday through Wednesday. Those are very easy days to get in at a campsite. And I don't think the price changes. I think it's pretty much the same no matter what time, what day of the week. It's not like hotels, but those are almost always open. And then you can try Hip Camp and some of these other things where they might not have as many reservations, but they're pretty inexpensive. I don't know what RV spots go for, but camping sites can go anywhere from like $15 to $35 up to maybe $40 at the most a night. So it's pretty inexpensive.
Yeah, that sounds good. Joseph, range of prices, since Cindy brought that up, is there, as far as budgeting for people?
Well, part of it depends upon what you're looking for. So with RV sites, you can go primitive where it's like a tent site where you have no electricity, no water, and they call us boondocking, right? All the way up to what they call full hookups, which is electric, water, and sewer, where you can just not have to go to the dump site to dump your RV sewage, and you can just dump it right there at the site. They have sanitation built in, right? So those ones can range depending on a fancy RV resort with hot tubs and pool and all kinds of other stuff. They could be $70-$80 a night, and sometimes higher depending on where it's at. A lot of cases, what we can find a full hookup for anywhere from $40 to $55.
Okay.
Yeah. So pretty economical also. Yeah.
Right. Great tips, both of you. It's I know it's just a little over 6:30, but there was so much information to share. So I want everyone to know where they can find you. Joe, if you want to tell them where they might find you and find your book.
Yep. So I'll put the book up here. It is RVing for Newbies. Throw a .com on the end of it. That's the website, literally RVingforNewbies.com. A shortcut is RVFN.net. That will get you there. On there is the first 4 chapters of the book are free for anybody to read. And then if you want to read anything beyond that, there's chapters that you can then, I literally wrote 20 chapters in the book. And now I'm writing the virtual chapters that the people that bought the book can go out and see the virtual chapters on the website. They get the password to all the videos and the other chapters and so on and so forth. But yeah, so on there's also my sister organization, RV Mentor. And part of the last thing I will tell you is I do RV inspections. So for somebody that's looking to go buy an RV, and if it's even new or used, I go out and do inspections and give them the yay, here everything looks good, or no, we got all kinds of problems you gotta get.
That is great. I love it. Thank
Fantastic.
you, Joe. Cindy, where can people find you and these camping trips?
They are both posted on my website on explorationwarrior.com. Really easy to find me. We'll put all of that in the descriptions too. So yeah, it'll be great.
Yes, and we'll list all of Joe's information, Cindy's information on the Travel Collective site. We'll have it in the show notes here on YouTube. If you like this content, every Wednesday we're coming back with more how-tos, what to do. And I hope you'll reach out to both Cindy and Joe. I know we got just a short time in there and they had so much great information. So thanks everyone for joining us. Have a great night and we'll talk to everyone soon. Take care.
Talk to you soon. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
Bye.
Bye.